My name is Francis Gary Powers Jr. I go by Gary. I'll be talking today about what it was like to grow up in the shadow of a famous figure. I'll talk with you about the U2 incident, the misinformation that still circulates around. Now, in regards to the U2 incident and the information that surrounds it, I want to start off by talking about this movie that some of you may have seen, Bridge of Spies. We basically all know that Dad gets exchanged for a Soviet spy, the Glienicke Bridge, Potsdam, Germany, on February 10th of '62. And when I first found out about this movie as a rumor, and of all people, Spielberg was going to be doing this movie, I'm thinking, oh, it's a rumor. He'll never pick this subject. Why would he do that? And then in July of 2014, I got confirmation that, oh my gosh, Spielberg has selected to do this movie. And my first thought was, how do you get in touch with Steven Spielberg? So I tried some friends in Hollywood, California, where I grew up. Dead ends. I could not get an introduction. I resorted to Google. I typed in his name, some of the movies he did, found people who worked with him, found some of their email addresses online, sent out an unsolicited email to about 6 or 7 of his colleagues. Hi, Gary Powers Jr. I understand that Mr. Spielberg will be doing a movie that will interpret my father. So it's very important that we reach out and establish contact to express the Powers family's concerns. If he bases the portrayal of my father on the misinformation of the time, they'll be painting him in a negative light. If based on the declassified information that's come to surface the last 55 plus years, they'll be painting him as a hero to our country. So for obvious reasons, very important to reach out and try to establish contact. On or about July 14th of 2014, Mark Platt got in touch with me. Mark Platt was the producer on this movie, so one of my emails worked and he was able to call me. Mark Platt is better well known for his production of Wicked on Broadway. So very well regarded in Hollywood, very well respected on Broadway, an institutional history that goes back many, many years with Mark Platt. He and I talked for about an hour. Talk about Dad, the U2 incident, what I've done to help set the record straight. I think he liked what I had to say. He hires me on as a technical consultant. So I get my contract in the mail, and I'm reading through it. I'm to provide audio tapes of Dad speaking. I'm to provide photographs of the family that they can Photoshop and use in the movie. I'm to provide any introductions that I can. And as I'm reading down through the contract, the very last paragraph, they don't have to listen to me. Okay. Then the very last sentence, if I don't like the end result, I can't sue. Tie my hands, use the family's name, and then do whatever they want to do. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, do I want to be involved with this? So I thought long and hard and figured it was better to be involved and try to persuade and show our side of the story than to walk away and have no say whatsoever. I'm very glad that I did participate as a consultant. It was a wonderful experience. Was able to meet Mr. Hanks, Mr. Spielberg, Austin Stoll, the young actor who portrayed my father. Even though the big picture of the movie is historically accurate, the time period, the duck and cover drills, the civil defense, the fear of the nuclear surprise attack against the Soviets or them against us was very, very accurately portrayed. But the details of every scene are not 100% accurate. The movie was based off of my father's book, Operation Overflight, that he wrote in 1970. It details his account of the U2 incident, what he went through, the exchange, and his homecoming. It was also based off of James Donovan's book called Strangers on a Bridge, which he wrote in 1965, and it goes into what he did to help represent the Soviet spy Rudolph Abel during the trial, and then the behind-the-scenes negotiations for the exchange of Rudolph Abel for my father, and what he did to help broker that exchange. Spielberg and his crew also used some of the newspaper headlines from the day. The very end of the movie, they acknowledged Dad as a hero to our country, so I can't complain. They did a great job of portraying my father and helping to set the record straight in regards to some issues. 1950, he gets in the Air Force. He gets his wings in '52. He's flying F-84s out of Turner, Georgia. In 1955, he's recruited by the CIA because of his outstanding record as an Air Force fighter pilot to fly these U-2s, new top-secret airplanes designed to fly at about 70,000 feet and take photographs of military bases and installations over foreign territory, hostile territory. He does 27 missions across or over or around the Soviet Union, China, India, Pakistan, Tibet, Middle Eastern countries, as well as Eastern European countries. He's selected to do the May 1st mission, which is to fly across the entire width of the Soviet Union. The first time this flight path has been attempted from Peshawar, Pakistan, across Sverdlovsk, over to Buda, Norway. About 2,600 miles approximately, may have even been as much as 3,000 miles. He takes off at about 6 a.m., crosses over the Soviet Union's border at approximately 68,000 feet. He starts to flip on and off the camera switches that will take the photographic imagery of the ground below. He is 4 hours into his mission. He's now at an altitude of 70,000 feet above the city of Sverdlovsk. There's a bright orange flash. A shockwave hits the plane, pushes the plane forward, throws my father back in his seat. Dad realizes that something's gone wrong. The controls no longer respond. You can't fly a plane without a tail section. The near miss of a Soviet SA-2 missile has exploded near enough to the tail section to cause structural failure. As a result, the nose pitches forward, the wings snap off, and my father finds himself spinning down towards the ground in the wreckage. He falls from 70,000 feet to about 30,000 feet before bailing out of the aircraft. The U-2 cockpit is very tight, very small, very compact. In order to eject, you've got to be in the perfect position, or else you could lose a limb. Realizing this, he does the following. He opens up the canopy, which floats off into space. He undoes his harness, and is immediately sucked up halfway out of the airplane. He is still connected by his air hose. So he's half in the cockpit, half out of the cockpit, spinning down towards the ground, being banged around, can no longer reach the destruct button on the dashboard of the cockpit of the airplane. He's realizing he's getting closer to the ground. He's able to break free of the air hose, falls free of the airplane. His parachute opens automatically at 15,000 feet. As he's parachuting down, he's noticing a dark car that's following his descent. He lands on the outskirts of a collective farm in the middle of the Soviet Union, near the city of Sverdlovsk. The farmers working the fields start to ask him questions in Russian. Well, Dad shrugs his shoulders. He doesn't speak Russian. This makes one of the farmers a little nervous. Who is this guy? Falls out of the sky, doesn't speak our language, holds a pitchfork up near him. Moments later, Dad communicates in the dirt, USA. They know he's an American. A few more moments go by, the black car shows up, 2 men get out, put him in the back seat, and they take him basically to the local law enforcement building downtown Sverdlovsk. He's asked some basic questions by someone who speaks broken English. Who are you? What are you doing here? Where'd you come from? To which my dad would reply, my name is Gary Powers. I had a mechanical malfunction. Can you take me to the American Embassy? No, that's not permitted. Can you take me to the American Red Cross? No, that's not permitted. And this is how it went the first few hours of his capture. Later that afternoon, early evening, the KGB show up. 2 guards, armed guards, take him by transport plane down to Moscow's airport. They then shuttle him over by car to Lubyanka prison. Lubyanka prison is the infamous KGB prison, part of and adjacent to the KGB headquarters downtown Moscow. And this is where my father finds himself his first night of captivity. For the next 5 days, between May 1st and May 5th, the Soviets say nothing about the shootdown. At home in Washington, D.C., President Eisenhower, Allen Dulles, head of the CIA, State Department and Air Force officials are meeting. They're trying to figure out, where's the plane, where's the pilot, why didn't it land in Buda, Norway, where it should have landed had it been a successful mission. But so far, the government, U.S. government analysts have not been able to figure out what happened. May 5th, Khrushchev, premier of the Soviet Union, comes up to center stage. Comrades, we've shot down an American spy plane. But Khrushchev intentionally makes no reference as to the pilot's fate. Because of that, the Eisenhower administration, thinking the pilot had died in the crash, or certainly Khrushchev would have paraded him around as evidence, they come up with a cover story that an unarmed weather research plane may have accidentally strayed across the border after the pilot had radioed trouble with his auction equipment. Khrushchev comes back up to center stage on May 7th. Comrades, not only did we shoot down the plane, but we also have captured the pilot, Francis Gary Powers, who's quite alive and kicking and was confessed to spying for the CIA. In 1960, very few people were aware of the CIA. Top secret government agency, created in 1947 as part of the National Security Act to safeguard Americans at home by gathering intelligence information from abroad. So it was a very big embarrassment for Eisenhower, World War II hero, beloved president, very well respected, to have to admit that we, America, had a spy agency and that we've been flying over these foreign hostile countries for the last 5 years. Eisenhower steps up to the plate, holds a press conference, takes full responsibility for his actions. He could have allowed Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA, to take the blame for this mission that didn't succeed, to be the fall guy. But Eisenhower realized that if he did that, that citizens in America and the world would think that he, as president, was not in control of his own country. At his press conference, he calls these missions and this program a vital but distasteful necessity in order to avert another Pearl Harbor. And while all this is unfolding, Khrushchev is furious. He's demanding an Eisenhower apology, a stop to the U-2 flights. Eisenhower refuses to apologize, but he does stop the flights over the former Soviet Union in the U-2s. While all this is unfolding, my dad has been stuck in a Russian prison cell now for about a week, 2 weeks. He's going through the interrogations. The first 7 days, he's lying to his captors outright, holding back as much information as possible, trying to mislead them any way he can. But on May 7th, international headlines around the world, U-2 shot down, summit conference in jeopardy, Eisenhower caught lying, the type of headlines that were being published. The KGB guard in charge of the interrogations, a copy of the New York Times in his hands, rushes into the interrogation chamber, shoves the New York Times into my dad's face, yells at him, "You've lied to us. You told us you were trained in Arizona. Well, the New York Times says you were trained in Nevada at Area 51. You might as well tell us everything. We'll get it out of your American press anyways." So, here my dad is stuck between a rock and a hard place. If he tells the full truth, he's giving away secrets. If he lies to them, gets caught, he could get shot, face the death penalty for espionage. So during his 3 months of solitary confinement and interrogation, he does the following. He tells the full truth when he knows they can verify the information in the press. It gives him credibility. He lies to them outright when he knows there's no way they can find out the answers. Names of pilots, number of missions, specifications about the equipment on board. Then he gives a part truth, a part lie, dances around the subject when he knows that they know something about the question they're asking, but not enough to contradict his answer, such as the altitude he was flying. My father always maintained that he was at the maximum altitude of 68,000 feet when he was shot down. First, it was close enough to be believable, yet far enough away to keep pilots out of harm's way should the missions continue. Dad spent a total of 3 months solitary confinement going through the interrogations, trying to get him to cooperate, trying to get him to divulge what he knows, and they're using almost any means necessary except physical abuse. There was no physical torture for my father, thank goodness, but there was mental torture. Sleep deprivation, bright spotlight, grueling questions, threats of death, things like that. He gets through the interrogations. After 3 months, he is then put before a trial, not a jury trial, but a judge trial in the Soviet Union in the Hall of Columns. 3 days of trial and deliberation by the judges ends up in a sentence of 10 years. He's sentenced to 10 years in prison. He starts to serve that sentence in Vladimir. Vladimir is about 2 hours outside of Moscow. While Dad is incarcerated in Vladimir, he can get access to certain press and certain books. He cannot get Washington Post, New York Times, Newsweek, things like that. He is allowed access to Pravda, which is the government-run newspaper in the Soviet Union at the time. Pravda, by the way, means truth. They are allowed access to any book by Jack London, a socialist author. They're allowed any access to socialist newspapers like the Daily Worker out of the UK. So Dad can get news and current events, but it's always from a socialist or a Soviet perspective. And this goes on for about an additional 18 months. 3 months of interrogations, 3-day trial, 18 more months of prison incarceration. a total of 21 months of captivity. Then on February 10th, 1962, it's a cold, dark, foggy morning, right out of a John Le Carré novel. You have two spies at the Glenager Bridge in Potsdam, Germany. On one side, the east side, is my father. On the west side is Rudolph Abel, who was captured in America in the late 50s. The two spies are positively ID'd, and they walk home to their respective freedoms. Rudolph Abel returns home a hero of the Soviet Union, a parade in his honor, postage stamp in his likeness, some medals for his heroics. Dad comes home to an American public that doesn't really know what to make of this ordeal. There have been editorials in the newspaper that my father had defected, that he had landed the plane intact, that he had spilled his guts and told the Soviets everything he knew, or that he hadn't followed orders and committed suicide, all of which were part truths, mistruths, some innuendos of the time. Dad was extensively debriefed by CIA, Kelly Johnson, the designer of the airplane, State Department and Air Force officials for about 3 weeks at a safe house in Maryland. On March 6th of '62, he's put before a Senate Select Committee hearing. 3 of the senators that review this case, Prescott Bush, President Bush's grandfather, Barry Goldwater out of Arizona, and Senator Russell, which the House Office Building is now named after in downtown D.C. Those 3 senators, their colleagues, 8 hours of deliberations, questions and answers back and forth. At the end of the day, a standing ovation for my father. He is exonerated of any wrongdoing and shown to be a fine young man performing well under dangerous circumstances. Basically, pat on his back, good job for your country. At the time, the CIA, the Air Force, the government, didn't do anything to really set the record straight. The misinformation continued to circulate around. Now, my father, it didn't really bother him. He didn't care what other people thought he should or should not have done. He knew that what he did was the right thing to do under the circumstances he found himself in, and he was often quoted as saying he'd do the exact same things again, given the exact same set of circumstances. The next 6 months, he is working at the CIA headquarters in McLean, Virginia. He is training agents on what to do if captured, how to appear to cooperate when in fact you're not giving away any information. But you have to remember that my father, first and foremost, is a pilot. That's all he ever wanted to do, was to fly a plane. His contract, signed with the CIA and the Air Force, said that all the pilots could go back into the military at a rank comparable to their peers. But since Dad was the known spy, they would be accused of employing spies if they took him back into his ranks. And that was one of the reasons that they were trying to figure out what to do with him when he came back home. Kelly Johnson, the designer of the airplane, comes to the rescue. He offers Dad a job as a Lockheed test pilot as long as he can pass the mental and physical examinations. Dad passes with flying colors. No ill effects from his incarceration. A little stomach digestive problem, a couple of night frights occasionally for the first few months at home, and those did subside over the next year. So that was the only ill effect. There was no physical or other mental issues than the little bit of night fright, which I think would be a part of post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. But it was mild, and it did not inhibit him from continuing to fly. So for the next 7 years, between 1963 and 1970, he's a test pilot for Lockheed. Prior to moving out to Los Angeles, he meets my mom at the CIA headquarters. They are walking around a corridor. They bump into each other. He spills coffee down the front of her. "Oh, I'm so sorry. Let me buy you another cup of coffee." They started talking. How about lunch? How about dinner? Romance starts to ensue. And sure enough, they marry in late '63. They move out to California. Dad's the Lockheed test pilot. I'm born in Burbank, California, June 5th of 1965. The same month that this book is published, in May of '70, he's let go from Lockheed. Some people think it was coincidence. My father believed that because he wrote his story, he ruffled somebody's feathers in the government contractor beholden to the government for contracts was obligated or asked to let him go. There's no official proof I've ever found to confirm that, but it is what my father believed, and I wanted to share that with you today. After he's written the book for about 2 years, he's on the lecture circuit. Some of you might remember the Soupy Sales show, the Johnny Carson show, late night talk shows of the era, traveling internationally, talking about his experiences, promoting his book for about 2 years. Then in 1972, he gets a job with KGIL radio station in the San Fernando Valley, flying a fixed-wing Cessna, reporting on news, weather, and traffic for the rush hour commutes. 4 years go by, 1976. He gets a job with NBC television, flying their helicopter for the evening news, reporting on news, weather, and traffic. Does that for about a year and a half. Then August 1st, 1977, coming back from Santa Barbara, California, helicopter runs out of gas, crashes. He and the cameraman are killed in the accident. So that's a very quick overview of the U-2 incident, my father's involvement, what he had gone through.
Discover what's new at the Anderson County Museum. Real artifacts, real history, real museum.